Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it's been a busy few weeks, and so I have taken to looking at my mobile phone and scrolling through the list of video ideas that I have on there because I've not had time to write anything new. I mean, we could just, insert some kind of image of running around like a headless chicken, because that's been me. And right at the top of my list of YouTube ideas was the phrase, what's been my favourite decade? Now, I don't mean in history. We've all got favourite periods of history that we like. Maybe the aesthetics of. I often say that I should have been maybe in my late teens, early 20s, in the 50s, because I really love the big petticoats and skirts, and I'm very into 1950s rock and roll music. So maybe that's when I should have been around doing my thing. But no, I actually mean, what's been my favourite decade of my life so far? So from 0 to 10 is clearly the first decade of anyone's life, not just mine, I'm not special. And I guess you can discount the first couple of years because I don't really remember much of being a baby. There are people who claim they remember being a tiny, tiny baby. I definitely don't, and I don't really believe people who say they can. But what I do know is that I really loved my childhood. When I look back at pictures of me in the first 10 years of my life, you can see that I was a kid who liked going out and playing. I had a lot of fun. There was a lot of love in my life. I didn't live as close to my sets of grandparents as I would have liked, but when I did see them, they made a big fuss of me. My parents made a fuss of me, and I have got a lot of fond memories of that first decade. Now, yes, there were sad times as well, obviously. In life, there's always times that aren't great, but the first 10 years of my life, I think, were right up there in terms of good. The decade between 11 and 20, that is a big one. It's the decade you probably change the most. You go from being a child to technically being an adult. And I say technically because whilst, you are legally an adult at the age of 18 in the UK, I should not have been considered an adult at that age. You change an awful lot. You go from, at the start of that decade, you're 10, going on 11, and you're this, sweet little thing, and then suddenly you're a 20-year-old, and for all you know, in the years in between those ages, you've had a complete and utter mental breakdown, if you're me. People will quite often say that those years are the best years of your life, and I'm here to say, no. If those were the best years of my life, then something's gone very badly wrong. Sure, it's the year when you're young and you don't have a lot of responsibilities and you can explore things for the first time. You discover alcohol, you discover sex, you discover all kinds of different things. But I'm not fond of my teenage years. In fact, if I had to say what my worst decade was, that would be it. I was very sensitive, I was very emotional, I was being bullied horrendously at school, so I did that really pivotal change from child to adult with this thing in my head like, oh, I'm the worst person in the world and I'm hideously ugly and everyone should just hate me because I'm not worthy of love. And that doesn't really transition you into a healthy adult. So yeah, my memories of my teenage years are mostly just bad decisions and feeling like I really disliked who I was becoming, and that was the fault of other people, and just too much hormone. So the 20s. Now, my 20s were an interesting decade for a lot of reasons. For a start, I didn't pass my driving test until I was 21, so I didn't have that sense of freedom and independence that having my own way of getting about gives you. I realise at this point that this It's the decade for most people where they move out of their parents' home and, you know, maybe even get married. And this is my video and my life, so none of that's gonna happen, okay? Just deal with it like I've had to. So yeah, I passed my driving test and I'd gotten my first full-time job. I was a preschool classroom assistant. In fact, I eventually became classroom supervisor. So, you know, I was studying for my qualification in childcare. I had money properly for the first time and a car. And yeah, you know, I did go out into the world and travel around the country to see gigs and pursue interests of mine like live comedy as well as live music and musical theatre and stuff like that. I, you know, had the freedom to actually go out and make the most of it. I do have quite a few fond memories of my 20s. You know, there were people in my life then who are still in my life now, and it was an alright time. I think I was learning quite a bit about who I was as a person, because I think the older you get, the more you do that. Unfortunately, it's also the decade of my life in which I met somebody who turned out to be an abusive piece of human garbage. So, you know, relationship-wise, my 20s... But you know, in your 20s, you are young and you're enjoying life and you're finding out a bit more about who you are and where you want to go with your existence. Yeah, my 20s were okay on the whole. But the next decade, now that was something special. My 30s. Now, I admit I'm biased because I am 40 at the time of recording this video and I've only just left the last decade of my life. My 30s have only just come to an end. But 100% so far, best decade of my existence. I think when you reach 30, there is this thing of like, oh, now I'm a proper grown-up. Because no matter whether you have sort of gone and moved out or got married or had kids or whatever in your 20s, you still feel really young. And then you turn 30 and people make quite a big deal of you turning 30. And it's like, oh, it all just got real. I'm an adult. And you've been an adult for a decade, but you know, you kind of are a real adult now. But for me, I didn't feel that sort of weird sense of pressure, I think because I took it off myself. For me, my 30s were just about really learning who I was as a person and what I wanted out of life. I realised that all my life I'd referred to myself as very much straight, and actually gender was irrelevant when it came to who I could fall for. So that was a pretty big thing that happened in my 30s. And I also had this realization that whilst working with children helped make up for the fact that I hadn't had any of my own, I had these creative impulses that I really wanted to turn into a career. I wanted to write, or I wanted to make video, or I wanted to do something that involved being really creative and working in the creative industry. And I was really lucky that also in my 30s I met probably the best human I've ever met in my entire life in Leslie, and she became not only my best friend, but also my business partner and person who I'm going to annoy until basically I die. She's so lucky. And that gave me the opportunity to actually say, right, I am going to try and make being creative a career, and I've got somebody who supports me and believes in me by my side, and that's super important. My 30s were also the decade that I joined the chorus I sing with, and obviously if I'd never done that, I might never have met Leslie, and I wouldn't have had half the experiences I have had or made half the friends that I have. It's been a decade of learning about myself, broadening my horizons, and just liking who I've become. And considering where I was when I was about 14, 15 and absolutely hated myself, that's a win. Now who knows, my 40s might turn out to be even better than my 30s, and in a lot of ways I hope that's true, because don't we all just want our life to keep getting better rather than progressively getting worse? That seems fairly standard. But I guess the fact is, I don't know, I just have to live through them and see what happens. Who knows? That seems really ominous. Now I'm scared. What's been the best decade of your existence so far? Why is that the best decade you've had? Let me know in the comments. I am gonna go and think back some more about how awesome my 30s were and how great I hope my 40s are. And if you enjoyed this video, you can feel free to give it a thumbs up. You can click on my floaty head if you'd like to subscribe, and last week's video is over there. I'll talk to you all next week. Take care everybody. Bye.